Welcome back to Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life with Laurel and Laurel. We are sharing today on the topic of gratitude in honor of Thanksgiving week. Hello, Laurel. I am so grateful for you.
I feel the same about you, Laurel, and good morning. Thank you again for inviting me to be with you.
Yeah, I love our topic today. It's one that's so near and dear to my heart. I first learned about gratitude journaling and keeping, inventory of gratitudes and actually listing out what you were grateful for way back in the late 90s. Do you remember when you first heard about that as a practice, Laurel?
I don't remember. I really don't remember. But when I first started keeping that gratitude list every day, I did it at the end of my day and I would list three.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
then I got to the point where three was easy. So I challenged myself with five and then 10.
Yeah.
Um, but it's so nice to remind myself of all that I have to be grateful for.
I know. It's such a beautiful practice. And, there's so many ways to get into this practice of feeling and experiencing gratitude. So we want to like really speak into some of those today. One of the ones that I just would love for you to share on was something that you shared on an Instagram post not too long ago that was about how you ended your day with your daughters when they were young. And to me, that was gratitude practice, and you didn't even know you were doing it.
Oh yeah, and I forgot about that post. So thank you for reminding me.
Mm.
Yeah, it started when they were really young. It was probably I'm thinking they were 2 and 4, but it was at a time in my marriage and in my household where there was a bit of tension. And putting them to bed at night, they always shared a room until, probably they were 8 and 10. Putting them to bed at night, we just started this practice of happy thoughts, we called it. And so one person would start, and it would be the next person and the next person. So three of us. And we would just keep going around and around until we really did exhaust all of our happy thoughts.
Yeah.
But it was the simplest, most beautiful practice because it started with bigger things and then got to things like the blue sky or my favorite pillowcase or really silly things, but it just brought us to this place where we shared together how much we had that made us happy.
Yeah.
Mm.
And what a beautiful way to expand the idea of gratitude, because gratitude is really, about feeling a certain kind of feeling. It's not about making a list and acknowledging, oh, this and this and this. It's really about feeling the feeling to change how you're vibrating to literally become come in sync with a sense of abundance and all that you have, right? And so this idea of having a happy thought is one of the pathways, right, to feeling gratitude, because what are you happy about? Whatever you're happy about is you're grateful for.
Absolutely. And it was exactly that. I mean, it was um the things all around us in everyday ordinary life
Yeah.
that we were happy to have in our life or that made us feel happy. And I think it really grew out of my own practice. That there was a day, it was in the 90s, and I wanted to be an optimist, and I didn't think I was an optimist. And it was some cover story on some women's magazine, you
I
know,
love it.
become an optimist,
Yeah.
10 easy steps.
Yeah.
And happy thoughts kind of was part of that as well.
Yeah.
Teaching my children that no matter how bad of a day we had, there were always things to be grateful for. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that years ago, and I would have said back in probably, yeah, probably early in the 90s. I think I transitioned somewhere in the 90s. Wouldn't have considered myself necessarily an optimistic person either. I think I was conditioned to tune in more to sadness and difficulty and struggling and all that kind of stuff because of my sensitivity to what was going on around me. And I think we condition ourselves to be one way or another more than we really understand and know, don't you?
I do. I really do. And some of it is is the expectation of other people
Hmm.
and having to fit into a family unit that
Yeah.
maybe there wasn't a lot of joy or happiness in,
Yeah.
right? And so how to fit in and how to be almost invisible, right? In
Mm.
that place.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I think that that's part of shifting the perspective on how much there is around us to be
Yeah.
grateful for, how much, even in the worst of times, there's still a glimmer of hope and happiness
Mm.
somewhere if we
Yeah.
look for it.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned the changing of the vibration because it does change your vibration and it reprograms your neural pathways in the brain.
Yes, yes, exactly. And all of these things are so interconnected. This
Yeah.
is part of the mind body experience that we refer to, but sometimes don't really understand, how it actually operates. And that is how it operates, as the mind begins to affect the nervous system affects the body, and the vibration affects what you actually attract into your life. And so,
Yeah.
this is kind of the mapping out of, if you can begin to change your thoughts and change your feelings and those things together, then you really do change your experience, and then
Yeah.
what's coming into your life suddenly seems a little different.
It does. And
Better.
you mentioned abundance, right? It's that abundance
Yes.
mindset. And I often remind myself that, some days abundance is easy to
Yes.
see. And on the days that it's not easy, I don't look for abundance. I look for what I call sufficiency. You know,
Mm.
it's, I have enough. I have everything I need, um, which in itself makes me happy.
Yeah. And that feeling is really close to the feeling of abundance, because when you have more than you need, I mean, we all can think about what does abundance actually mean to us, right? For me,
Mm.
abundance means really more than I need. I mean, it's so full that it's overflowing. And when you're feeling sufficient, you're on the way to vibrating at more than what I want. You're at, I've got what I need. I've got what I want, right? And
I
if I
have
don't
enough.
have what I want, I'm happy with what I have, right? For now. For
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have a client friend who I watched her probably about 10 years ago dedicate herself to truly adopting an abundance mindset. And I watched her literally begin to transform her life. And the outside transformed from her actually doing just what you said, which was, I have everything I need. I have right now everything that I want around me. This feels very sufficient. It feels like, looking at the small things, going and just being able to say, oh, I can reach right over here and just grab my lemon water, and I'm really, this is what I want and need right now. So I'm so happy to have exactly what I want. That feeling, right, begins to expand into more moments of your day. When you do that, it becomes a pattern that you develop, right? And it does transform your life. And I watched it with her, how powerfully it can happen.
Yeah. And that, I'd love to know more about that. And just when I see that happen to either friends or family or even my clients, often the things we take for granted
Yeah.
are the things that weigh us down, our stagnant energy. And then when we shift into that abundant mindset or just gratitude as a way of being, not even a practice, but a way of being,
Yeah.
we no longer take things for granted. We are grateful to have all of the simplest, ordinary aspects in our life, like the lemon water, right?
Yeah, I know. I know. I got to have a lemon in my water today. I feel really happy. It's not just water. It actually has a lemon in it. That's good stuff, right? Yeah. And not overlooking that, because it's so easy to begin to overlook that. And I think sometimes the more you have, then you can begin to overlook that. So coming back and being in that space of, a treat would be lemon water. Like that reminds you how the simple things do please. And getting more and more isn't necessarily what pleases us. So it isn't that abundance I've had people say to me, "Oh, abundance, what is it? It's more than what you need. It's silly. Why are we all focusing on that kind of thing?" And in some respects, that is true because if you have more than what you need, what are you going to do with it all? And we live in a culture of everybody's has so much material stuff and we're unhappy. So it doesn't really create happiness. So it's the idea of really feeling that feeling of appreciating what you have. And that's what we're talking about this week, and why we want to bring it into this experience of the Thanksgiving week, because what are we giving thanks for? What are we appreciating in our lives? What do we feel grateful for? And how can we actually feel it? Not just say it, but feel it, right?
And I'm glad you brought up the material things as a component, if you will, of the abundance mindset. But what if maybe I'm going to encourage our listeners,
Yeah.
what if you begin to think about abundance in all that you are
Yes.
rather than all that you have,
Yeah.
right? So, because I do in my own practice, I believe that the comparison to others ruins the abundance and the gratitude. And so, feeling like you have an abundance of what you have, and maybe you have what some people may judge as too much. When you compare yourself to others that don't have enough, then you start to, the feelings, it's no longer a happy feeling, right?
Yeah.
It's no longer a satisfaction or fulfillment. It brings up other emotions, maybe shame or guilt. And then look, on the flip side is when you're focused on people that have more abundance than you, no matter how abundant you feel, that comparison to other people still ruins it. And so I try to think about the abundance of all that I am, all that I give, and all that I have access to around me and this is probably, the physical world, the spiritual world, and not necessarily the material world, right? The abundance of energy and love and flow in my life is what so many times I'm most grateful for.
Absolutely. I so agree with you, Laurel. And I think that's a great challenge for our listeners is to begin a gratitude practice, but don't have it be about material things, right? Make sure that you're creating a list that's non-material as well as material, and because again, it's that idea of what are you already experiencing or what do you have access to that you can feel that sense of gratitude for, whether you have the car you want or not, whether you're living in the home that you really want to be living in or not. It's this idea of what's in your relationships, what's in your daily life, what's in your heart, that you even wanting, the feeling of wanting or longing for a certain something, you can feel grateful for that feeling. It's a really interesting practice to say that, right? Because any desire in our heart is the impulse to become creative.
Mm.
And so, appreciating that desire in your heart as a creative force in your life can be a beautiful thing.
Mm. I love that. It's so warming just thinking about that as, longing as a creative expression or as a creative opening. You're
Yeah.
inviting in what you don't currently have in
Yeah.
a way that you're grateful for it before you even receive it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And exploring it internally more than just the feeling. We are in such a instant gratification culture, and have been for so long. And I think honestly, some of life is conspiring to get us out of it. Our life is organizing to get us out of that instant gratification experience, and instead, be able to latch on to other aspects of experiencing life and creating life, and not just the end result,
Yeah.
fast and furious, right?
Yeah. So what does your gratitude practice look like in your life?
Yeah, I think in my life it's in the morning more often than not. In my meditation practice, I have something in that hour that I'm sitting where I brought back to really feeling into the gratitude of even that moment, just that moment of sitting in that space. And oftentimes that will lead me into a more expansive sense of what am I grateful for right now in my life, feeling it, really being with it, taking the time while I'm in it to even say a prayer of thanks to whoever that is I'm thinking of, or whatever it is that has changed or shifted and has brought me into that place of feeling grateful. Just sending out appreciation for that. I think that and then, at the holiday, I'll come into the holiday. The last few, I started probably a gratitude practice when my kids were young at the Thanksgiving holiday, where we circled up whoever was there for dinner with us. We'd circle up and we'd share what we were grateful for. And in the last couple of years, my daughter has kind of taken over leading that process, and she's shifted it a little bit to what do you appreciate in your life, or we might do it, turn to somebody on your left and tell them what you appreciate about them. And it's interesting, the little subtle difference in what are you grateful for and what do you appreciate. There's a little interesting subtle energy difference with that. It makes it more personal when you say what are you appreciating. It turns you to look at what it is that you are looking towards and are grateful for, and you begin to appreciate it. It's like you're sending out energy of
Mm.
thanks to that other thing rather than being self-focused. It's interesting practice. I've really loved that.
It's really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And how about you? What's your practice like right now, Laurel?
So I typically do, my grateful list of things I'm grateful for in the morning.
Mm,
But in my evening, I do a lot of journaling in the evening. And so that is my time where I really am reflecting on more than just the immediate presence, I'll say present. It's a gratitude practice in the evening that is much more comprehensive. Um, and sometimes even being grateful for the lessons that hard things have taught me, that comes out a lot in my journaling.
yeah.
um, and my hope for the future comes out in my journaling in a way of appreciating what I don't have and what I strive to be. So that's really where my practice is now. I also am one to stop and notice things during the day and really, it's one of the things I think my husband will often roll his eyes sometimes, and I just appreciate the magnitude or the magnificence of the world around us.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that for a long time. I have a story when we were hiking. It was in the early 90s when we were newly in a couple. I guess it was mid 90s, and we were hiking up in Acadia National Park, and I gave thanks and praise. It was just the most amazing rock formation that gave steps, to in our hike.
Yeah.
And as I was giving, appreciation for the power of the universe and a God who put these rocks right where they needed to be, my husband looked at me and said, "You don't think that the trail builders did that?" And and while he appreciates the trail builders, I am appreciating the universe, right? And
Yeah.
so it's so much fun still 26 years, 30 years later, however many years, that we share gratitude and appreciation for all that there is in very different ways.
Yeah, yeah, and that it's also beautiful. Noticing,
Yeah.
because what we notice is also different. I always feel like nature brings me to my knees, literally, in gratitude. That's so many times when I'm really letting myself feel the fullness of the beauty of what I'm looking at. It is literally, yeah, it makes me just feel so grateful
Yeah.
for this beautiful earth that we live on and are part of. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
I have another gratitude practice that I did for a few years, and I brought this to my children when they were adults as well. But it came over the gratitude of monetary, and so trying to work through the feeling of not having enough money in my life at one point when I didn't have uh, an overabundance of money in my life, but carrying a $100 bill
Mm.
and every day saying, I have enough money to buy that if I want to, or that if I want to, or that if I want to. And it was shocking how quickly it shifted my, my perception of what I was lacking.
Yeah.
Um, so,
I
so I
love
think,
that one, Laurel. That is a great practice and a great reminder of it's all choice too, right? It's all
mm,
how we're choosing to look at it and how we're choosing to experience it and what we really need versus what we really want, and where's that want really come from? I mean, it really helps you explore that and play with that in a different kind of way, doesn't it?
and the play, I think, is really important, right?
Mhm.
Talking about changing the energy behind our appreciation and gratitude, having a playful, joyful approach in our thoughts really helps, I think, appreciate more in our life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Will you share? You were sharing with me about having people write some gratitudes, and that you
Yeah.
have a jar actually. And I loved that idea. So will you share that idea with us and share from that a little bit?
Sure. And this is our Thanksgiving. Our Thanksgiving tradition is I host every other year. And, it's not unusual for me to have 25 people in my home for Thanksgiving. And so the last 2 years ago, pre-COVID, it was, I guess, 2019, was I had a gratitude jar and pieces of colored construction papers and paper, and asked everyone to write something they were grateful for, and we put it in the jar. And um, it became what we read it during dessert, right? So we started our meal with the typical grace and people contributing to that, and then ended in a dessert with reading anonymous what everyone around that table was grateful for, and it was so incredible. And we also had a a wish jar for the future, and this ties into what you were saying about kind of that longing of what, and that was fun as well. And my intention was with the future one was to read it the next year when we were all back at someone else's table together.
Ah,
um, and of course we didn't get together in 2020 for Thanksgiving, so I'm hoping that this year we will all be back together, and I still have that jar unopened.
yeah.
I can't wait to see what people were forecasting, I'm going to say, as what they wanted to bring into their life, and how closely that will look or fit with what they're grateful for now in their lives. So that will be fun.
Yeah.
um, and I think I did tell you that I carry one of these pieces of construction paper with me in my journal now, and I read it almost every day, and I'm going to share it with you and the listeners. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
I don't know who wrote this. I have no idea. But it says, if I were to have one wish for all of the tomorrows that are yet to be, it would be this: that I have the presence and good memory to cherish every blessed moment. And I carry that with me just as a reminder that we do need to be present and have presence of mind and good memory to cherish what we have in our life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
That's so beautiful. Laurel, for some reason, it's bringing me to this place of which somehow fits in, but I'm not really sure. So I'm going to talk it out a little bit here.
Okay.
It's making me think about a book I'm reading right now, which is called The Path of Least Resistance. And I can't remember the author's name right in this moment, so I'll put it in the notes here for the podcast. And it's a book about creativity. And it's really written from perspective of somebody who is an artist but who also teaches about the process of creativity. And one of the main things that he shares and really instills in us as the reader is the understanding that we really weren't conditioned to come into the world to get clear about what we want. We were conditioned to come into the world and get clear about what we're supposed to do and what we're supposed to have and what the next thing is that you're, whatever. And this idea of creativity, true creativity, and becoming a creative force, right, is the beginning part of it is you have to know what you want because you have to get clear on what you're trying to produce as a creative. And so I think it's like as we were talking and getting more into this idea of, you know, what we want and what we might not have, I think sometimes we approach it from a sense of scarcity and lack rather than that idea of what we want in our heart is a longing that keeps us creative. And how can we see it as that and be a little more maybe detached from it so that we can get about crafting a life that we really do want to be living? And that's some beautiful work.
That is really beautiful. And that creativity, it makes me think about how often when we try to create something, whether it's at work or those of us who work for ourselves, and we sit down and we are intent in producing something. And oftentimes, that push it does not bring us to a creative place. So I love the thought about just creating a sense of longing and letting something flow from that without the scarcity, right?
Right, right.
Um, and I often lead my clients through a process of feeling and letting the feeling you want to feel be your guiding light for how the choices you make in life, right? And so rather than thinking about what you want, how do you want to feel, and then living fully to discover what makes you feel that way.
Yeah, yeah,
And that is a creative way of living
yeah,
rather than the old way I used to live with the check boxes and spreadsheets of achievable, attainable goals.
yeah. Well, I do because I do think that when you discover what you want from a more soulful place, not from the place of conditioning, but from a place of what's really in your heart and in your soul, you get excited. You don't get afraid. You might get a little afraid, but it's an excited afraid, right? It's like, ooh, the afraid is more like, could I possibly do that? Can I really go for that? Right? But it's excited. And so when we think about how we want to feel, more often than not, we want to feel these kind of vibrations of happiness, excited, content, peaceful, right? They're all things that are more related to a pure, they're closer to getting, I think, in touch with what we want. Because when we are thinking about what we want, right, or when we want something, the desire is, there's an excitement behind it when we're getting clear about what we want. There's real, you know, um, yeah, like your eyes light up, right? And
Yeah.
you're like, "Ooh, wouldn't that be great?" Right? It's not like, "Oh, I have to do that." Right? You don't feel that way about it. You go, "Wow." Yeah. Yeah. And we've been, as he says in the book, we've been so focused on process and what are the steps to get to a certain result when we sometimes don't even want that result, or we're not even clear about the result that we want. And so then we're kind of on a path that takes us on and off and on and off and oscillating and unhappy, generally speaking. So yeah.
And
Yeah.
that fits in really well with when you were talking about feeling gratitude and feeling appreciation, right? Because oftentimes, in my list, if I'm writing 3 things every day or 10 things every day, oftentimes I repeat the same thing I'm grateful for. And there's less of a feeling of a energetic charge or an excitement. It's a more solid feeling that is stable and safe, but doesn't have that vibration of excitement or newness. And so, I love that thought as go through and develop a gratitude practice. Notice the feeling in your body
Yeah.
as to be somewhat of an indicator of those things that are not cognitive, gratitude. It's really embodied gratitude.
Yes, yes, yes. And such a different feeling when we're
Mm,
out of our head, just the head part of gratitude, but in the full body experience of
yeah,
gratitude.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So let's see. As we begin to kind of wrap up here, Laurel, what's coming up for you? I mean, we could offer certainly, invite listeners to start a gratitude practice if they haven't. Um, but what else is coming up around some, like a challenge or a sense of newness around this idea of gratitude, shall we say?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it would be fun for our listeners, and us
Yeah.
to bring something new into our Thanksgiving holiday,
Mm,
right? Often we have a tradition that is so much the same year after year,
mhm.
from what we serve to what is for dessert to the hour at which we dine, right?
Yeah.
So bring something new into your Thanksgiving holiday that really invites your guest, your family, and yourself to embody gratitude a little bit deeper and differently than you have in the past on that one day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great, Laurel. I'm gonna play with that one a little bit too. I think mine relates to that a little bit, but maybe has a little different twist. And I think my challenge to our listeners is when you think about, the day, the Thanksgiving day, and what your plan is, what is one thing that you can make sure you have in that day that you really want to be doing?
Mm.
So that at the end of the day you can be grateful for that experience, because I think that many times when I'm working with people, they aren't really enjoying the holiday the way that they want to, or they aren't enjoying the company the way that they really want to be, and so we feel somewhat powerless over our holiday experience. And how do you begin to change that around? And I think you begin to change it around by starting to make small moves towards making the day what you want it, more of what you want it to be. And when you're clear about what you want it to be, then you can take action to start to make the changes. And so, just the idea of saying, okay, I know I want to, get in touch with nature that day, right? Well, do something that day to get outside and make a devotion or a dedication to nature, and feel good at the end of the day. Say, yeah, that was part of my day. That was how I feel good that I spent part of my day the way I wanted to. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that because, so many times holidays are about our obligations and responsibilities to other people. So I think it is really important to add something that you want to do
Yeah.
for you because of you rather than for everyone else out of obligation.
Yeah. Yeah. And also it challenges us too to start to play with. Sometimes I know when my kids were younger and I started experimenting with the holidays and what we were doing and doing it a little differently. And it started to help me sort out the parts of the rituals and the ceremonies and the things that we did yearly that I did like, and then the parts that I didn't like. And so that I could start to craft it to be more of what I wanted and start to let go of some of the traditions that really didn't fit for me and who I was. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so important.
Yeah. So I know before we close off, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you to our listeners. And we have a small dedicated group of listeners. I mean, I get some really beautiful notes of thank you from some dedicated listeners. And I feel so grateful that we are being received and that we are helping support others on their beautiful work and that they're partaking in this idea of beautiful work, beautiful life, because we know they're some of the people that are really helping to make the world a more beautiful place. So I thank you, listeners, for being with us.
I have a few of loyal listeners as well that reach out to me after they listen. And I too am so grateful and appreciate all of the feedback and the time that they take to be thoughtful about how they're choosing to spend their time, because that is part of the beautiful work.
Yeah.
And thankful that they are spending part of their own time with us. So
Yeah. Yeah. So we send you lots of love for a holiday that feels really good at the end of the day. We hope that you can sit and look back and say, I'm grateful for that day. Yeah. Yeah. That would be my wish.
Mine too.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Laurel. We'll be back again for more of Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life. So grateful for you, Laurel, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Laurel. Bye bye.
Bye for now.